The life of an NFL quarterback can be brutal, but Deshaun Watson might have the strangest career the league has ever seen.
It's so awful that if somebody wanted to arrest him for being awful, I would accept it.
Through the first 6 weeks of the 2024 season, Watson had the worst QBR in NFL history. And after he tragically tore his Achilles in Week 7, some Browns fans cheered. But even after the injury, Cleveland can't move on from Deshaun because of his infamous $230 million fully guaranteed contract. And to think, in Watson's last season with Houston, he was shattering franchise records. How does that happen? How does someone go from franchise savior to the worst quarterback in the entire league? What really happened to Deshaun Watson, and how did he fall off so fast? To better understand Watson's up and down career, we first got to take you back to Gainesville, Georgia, where Deshaun was a high school legend. When he attended Gainesville High, his numbers were generational: 17,134 total yards, 218 total touchdowns, 13,077 career passing yards, and 155 career passing touchdowns. Every single one of these stats became a new state record in Georgia. And because of that, Deshaun was a 4-star recruit and the top-ranked QB in the class of 2014. But there was never a question about where he was going to be playing college ball. Watson committed to Clemson as a sophomore and never wavered, even graduating high school a semester early to join the team ahead of schedule. Still, he started his career with the Tigers as a backup to Cole Stout, but that wouldn't last long, because after 3 games, while only playing limited reps, Watson totaled 479 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions, outperforming Stout. After that, he took the starting job and never looked back. In his very first start against UNC, Watson threw a school record 6 touchdowns to go with 435 yards. And despite missing games due to a broken hand and having his freshman season cut short after suffering a torn ACL, Watson still stuffed the stat sheet with 1,466 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, and just 2 interceptions. And his sophomore year was even better. Not only did the Tigers go undefeated during the regular season, they ended the year as the #1 team in the country. Clemson won their first ACC championship in 11 years, beat Oklahoma to start the college football playoff.
The Tigers are now 1 game away from becoming the first 15-0 team in FBS history and national champions.
And despite falling to Alabama in the national title game, Watson set the record for most total yards in a national title game ever, with 478. He also became the first FBS player to throw for over 4,000 yards and rush for over 1,000 as a sophomore. This helped him become a Heisman finalist and be named the top quarterback in all of college football, winning the Davey O'Brien Award. And Watson kept that momentum going for an iconic junior year. Not only did Clemson finish the season 12-1, this time around, they won the national title over Alabama to avenge their loss from a season ago. It was Clemson's first national title since 1981, and just their second in school history. And Deshaun put together one of the all-time great college football seasons, with 4,593 passing yards, 629 rushing yards, and 50 total touchdowns. Even in the one game they lost against Pitt, Watson went for 580 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. He ended his college career with a 32-3 record, the best record in school history at the time, finishing with 10,163 passing yards and 90 total touchdowns. But after reaching the pinnacle of college football, it was time to move on. So on November 8, 2016, he declared for the 2017 NFL Draft.
3 years kind of flew by, but I think it's my time to go. Just kind of ended with a bang, and I felt like personally knew my time was up.
And while Watson couldn't have done anything more to boost his draft stock, there were still doubts. Many saw Deshaun as a prospect lacking arm strength and pocket presence.
I think there are other quarterbacks in the draft with stronger arms than him, but I would take Deshaun Watson.
And he was very different from the traditional NFL QB mold, while others saw his creativity, ability to extend plays, and throw off platform. But what no one could deny was that he was a winner. Still, because of his unique traits, it was going to take the right team falling in love with him for Watson to come off the board early. That team was the Houston Texans. They had just traded their starter from a season ago, Brock Osweiler.
Houston and Cleveland have reportedly agreed on a trade, sending Brock Osweiler to the Browns,
dumping a massive 4-year, $72 million contract. So, after Mitch Trubisky was selected 2nd overall and Patrick Mahomes 10th,
the Houston Texans select Deshaun Watson, quarterback, Clemson.
Ironically, Houston acquired this pick from the Cleveland Browns, and going to Houston marked the beginning of Watson's meteoric rise into NFL superstardom. However, going into his rookie season, he wasn't named the starter. Because Tom Savage had a slightly stronger preseason, he was named the Week 1 starter.
Deshaun Watson's first NFL start will have to wait. On Tuesday, Texans head coach Bill O'Brien said Tom Savage will begin the season as a starting quarterback.
But just like college, Deshaun's time on the bench didn't last long. In Houston's 2017 opening game, Savage played the first half, but after just 62 yards, a QBR of 13.4, and a 19-point deficit, he was benched, which gave Watson the opportunity he needed. He ended that game with 101 yards and his first career touchdown on this 4-yard pass to DeAndre Hopkins.
Watson throws to the back of the end zone. Caught DeAndre Hopkins. Hello, Deshaun Watson.
Watson was named the starter for Week 2, getting his first NFL win with 125 passing yards and this 49-yard rushing house call against the Bengals. And he kept the momentum going. In fact, when October rolled around, he was on fire. Because in Week 4 against the Titans, not only did Watson throw for 283 yards and 4 passing touchdowns, he also added on a rushing touchdown, tying the NFL record for most total touchdowns by a rookie QB in one game with 5. And he had 5 more touchdowns the following week against Kansas City. In October alone, Watson threw a rookie record 16 touchdowns, earning AFC Rookie and Player of the Month honors. Unfortunately, that high didn't last long, because just 2 days into November, Watson tore his ACL during practice, ending his season. Watson ended his rookie year with 1,699 passing yards, 19 passing touchdowns, and 2 rushing TDs. At the end of 2017, the Texans' record without Watson starting under center was 1-9. With him, 3-3. That set up Deshaun for a huge leap in year 2. But the start of the 2018 season had the Texans fans concerned. When Deshaun returned from injury, Houston opened the year 0-3.
Right now, we have some things to figure out.
But after he shook the rust off, he was right back to dominating as the Texans rattled off 9 wins in a row. The Texans ended up winning the AFC South title, and in just his second season, Watson was already creeping toward top 10 quarterback status with 4,165 passing yards on 68.3% completion and 31 touchdowns. But while the regular season numbers are nice, what really makes you a star is how you perform in the postseason. And in Deshaun's first crack at the playoffs, he threw for 235 passing yards and a touchdown. And despite Houston falling to the Colts, hope was building in Houston with Watson under center. Deshaun was named to his very first Pro Bowl, and the expectations for his third season were sky high. And in 2019, Watson continued to improve, and the Texans won their second straight AFC South title behind Deshaun's strong play. He won AFC Offensive Player of the Week honors 3 times, including this perfect passer rating performance against Atlanta. In this game, he put up a career-high 426 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, and no picks. And his numbers for the season were insane. 3,852 passing yards to go with 33 total touchdowns. In Houston's wildcard matchup with Buffalo, Watson finished with 247 passing yards, 2 total touchdowns, and an overtime drive for the ages. On 2nd and 6, Watson escaped 2 sacks, leading to this 34-yard reception by Tywan Jones, setting up Houston for the game-winning field goal. They went to the AFC divisional round against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and they started the game up 24-0, but the Texans ended up losing, despite 388 passing yards and 3 total touchdowns from Watson. It appeared to be another great season to build on, but this loss to Kansas City marked the beginning of the end for the Houston Texans team, because changes throughout the organization led to major issues within the team. On January 28, 2020, recent hire Jack Easterby was put in charge of football operations, and later that year became the interim GM. Then all hell broke loose, because on March 22, 2020, DeAndre Hopkins, Watson's top target, was traded.
What were your thoughts about Bill O'Brien of the Houston Texans trading DeAndre Hopkins clearly for emotion? Clearly because of emotion, because it makes no football sense whatsoever.
And after trading away a franchise legend and their best receiver, they still needed to pay their star quarterback. So Houston inked a deal to make Watson the face of their franchise for the foreseeable future. On September 5th, 2020, Deshaun signed a 4-year, $177.5 million deal with the Texans that included $111 million guaranteed. This was the then second largest contract in the NFL. The deal was supposed to keep Watson with Houston until 2025. And arguably, the most important factor of this contract was its no-trade clause. The thing is, more changes were on the horizon, because after starting the 2020 season 0-4, longtime coach Bill O'Brien was fired, and defensive coordinator Romeo Crennel was named the interim head coach.
Bill O'Brien has been fired as the Houston Texans coach, and of course he's also the GM. Romeo Crennel is the interim head coach.
But despite the chaos, Deshaun had arguably the best season of his career. The problem was, the rest of the team was in shambles, and Houston was terrible. Following back-to-back AFC South titles, the Texans finished just 4-12 and missed the playoffs. Watson still led the league in passing yards with 4,823, setting a Texans franchise record, and had career bests in completion percentage and passing touchdowns. But none of that mattered, because Watson's video game stats weren't enough to overcome the team's atrocious defense, which was one of the worst in the NFL, allowing the third most yards per game. And after the letdown that was the 2020 season, more drama ensued.
So if you can't go out there and you can't work out, you can't show up on time, you can't practice, you can't want to go out there and win, you shouldn't be here.
Houston went full rebuild in the front office and coaching staff. So, on January 7, 2021, Nick Caserio became general manager of the Texans, taking on a complete mess of a situation. Then, less than a month later, Watson officially requested a trade out of Houston, just 4 months after signing his massive deal.
Something's going on in that organization. Something happened.
1, he was still pissed off about the DeAndre Hopkins trade. 2, Watson had wanted the Texans to interview then Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy for the head coaching position, and they didn't. And 3, Texans owner Cal McNair ignored any of his opinions when hiring GM Nick Caserio. But you just don't trade a star quarterback. So the Texans made changes in hopes of making Deshaun happy. Just 1 day after Watson's trade request went public, Houston hired Baltimore assistant coach David Culley to be their head coach, a coach who was fully committed to building the team around Deshaun. But just days after that, J.J. Watt requested to be released by the team. The Texans were falling apart, and it was about to get a lot worse for Watson, because on March 16, 2021, shocking news broke in Houston. Just weeks after all the team drama, allegations against Deshaun Watson started coming out. The first civil lawsuit was filed against him regarding inappropriate conduct with massage therapists in Houston.
The allegations of sexual assault and inappropriate behavior against Watson are being investigated by the FBI.
Watson posted on social media following the news, but the cases started stacking up. This began a domino effect of claims against the Texans' star quarterback. In less than 3 weeks, a total of 22 lawsuits were filed against him. And it was revealed that in just 17 months, Watson had met with 66 different massage therapists from 2019 to 2021. Watson's endorsement deals with Nike and Beats by Dre halted immediately. And yet, Deshaun's biggest payday was still in the not-so-distant future. Throughout the emergence of these cases, Watson remained on the sidelines, and he was still able to participate in off-season activities with the Texans. Watson did report to training camp. However, he still wanted out of Houston. And even with his legal problems, teams still wanted him. But ultimately, he ended up staying in Houston and sitting out the entire 2021 season as the Texans posted another rough record of 4-13, which led to the biggest shift in Watson's career. Just 1 week after getting cleared by a grand jury of his then 22 charges, Watson was traded in a huge blockbuster deal. And this trade is another reason why Deshaun had one of the biggest fall-offs in NFL history. What has now been called one of the worst trades in NFL history has an interesting background. Remember that no-trade clause in Watson's contract? That clause gave him power in this strange situation. He could choose the team he wanted to go to, and he ultimately settled on Cleveland. So, on March 8, 2022, the Houston Texans traded their then-franchise quarterback and a 6th-round pick to Cleveland for 6 different picks. But giving up all those picks wasn't the worst part of the deal, because the way the Browns reworked his contract backfired. Not only did Deshaun receive $230 million through 2026, but all that money was fully guaranteed, the most in NFL history, and a contract structure you never see in the NFL. The Browns also pushed most of Watson's money to the end of his contract due to the possibility of him getting suspended in 2022. This helped Watson, but this move would haunt Cleveland in the coming years. Browns owner Jimmy Haslam was the one who put together this contract, and he continued to defend his decision, saying, "We did what we thought was in the best interest of our team. We still feel that way." But the chaos that surrounded Watson just followed him to the Browns. Then star Baker Mayfield requested a trade out of Cleveland in the same week, and he was soon sent to the Panthers. Then, going into the 2022 NFL season, 2 more lawsuits were filed against Watson.
The attorney for the women in the Watson case is preparing to file 2 more civil lawsuits against Watson, and that will bring the number to 26, which is staggering.
And in June 2022, 20 out of the 24 current cases reached settlements. Fans were starting to wonder what this would mean for Watson's situation on the field. And on August 18, 2022, we found out.
Our breaking news is about Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson. We just confirmed the NFL and NFL Players Association have reached an agreement on his discipline. Watson will now serve an 11-game suspension and pay a $5 million fine for violating the league's personal conduct policy.
Then on November 28, 2022, Watson was reinstated, officially able to play NFL football again. But he was a shell of the quarterback that he was in Houston. In Week 13, Watson made his Cleveland Browns debut, ironically, against his former team. Despite the 27-14 win, Watson had the worst passer rating of his career at 53.4, going for 131 passing yards and an interception. And this was on par with the rest of Watson's 2022 season. In 6 games, Watson had the worst output of his entire career. He finished the year 3-3 and put up 1,102 passing yards with a 58.2 completion percentage. He also had just 7 passing touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Add in a QBR of 40.4 and a passer rating of 79.1. All of these stats were career lows. Oh, and the Browns finished last in the AFC North, posting a 7-10 record. But many thought Deshaun Watson's extended absence from the game was to blame for his poor play. Until 2023 rolled around. Watson didn't get any better, but the Browns did. Because injuries destroyed his second year in Cleveland, Watson missed weeks 4 and 6 due to a shoulder injury, and in week 7, he had just 5 pass attempts before taking this nasty fall against the Colts. This would be a sign of what was to come. In the first half of Cleveland's Week 10 matchup against the Ravens, Watson suffered a fracture in his right shoulder. But in Watson's absence, the Browns finished with an 11-6 record, making the playoffs behind stellar play from Joe Flacco. Watson, on the other hand, played just 6 games for the second straight season, posting a 5-1 record. But he had nearly identical numbers to 2022, putting up just 1,115 passing yards, 7 passing touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. He got surgery just 1 week after his injury, saying, "I'm very confident in my rehab and my mindset and my determination to get back strong." At this point, Cleveland was hoping for any return on their investment in Watson. But in 2024, he's just hit rock bottom. In the first week of the season, another lawsuit was filed against Watson, a clear effect on his mental state, and his numbers prove it. Through the first 6 weeks of the 2024 season, both Cleveland and Deshaun were in a state of disarray.
I'm sick and tired of paying money for this cheap shirt, this cheap hat.
The Browns went 1-5. Watson had the worst QBR in the entire league, sitting at just 21.7, and he had 2 games with a QBR under 9. Yes, you heard that right. And Watson was sacked 31 times in 6 weeks. Then, in the second quarter of their Week 7 game against the Bengals, as Deshaun was attempting to run, he collapsed to the ground in pain. He had torn his Achilles, officially ending his season. But that really doesn't change much for the Browns. Watson's contract carries a $73 million cap hit in 2025 and 26. So, no matter how he looks after returning from injury, Cleveland has no out. Because of Watson's contract, owner Jimmy Haslam and the Browns put themselves in a high-risk, no-reward situation.
Any kind of a cut at this point is an extinction level event, so it's not possible. You can't get rid of Deshaun Watson.
For many reasons, the NFL career of Deshaun Watson can be seen as the most confusing situation ever. From his historic rise into superstardom to one of the steepest downfalls we've ever seen. Watson and Cleveland now find themselves in a dark hole, and their only way out is that Deshaun comes back the player he used to be. If you enjoyed this video, stick with Blitz, subscribe, and check out some of our other content right here.